Does my voice sound silky smooth now?
Yeah, it's fine, I guess.
My new mic finally came in. Can you even tell a difference?
No.
I think it sounds delightful. All right. You want to talk about it?
Yes, I do. Okay, so this weekend, the remake of the very popular Stephen King movie It came out, and it's actually based off the probably more popular book. It's one of his earlier books that was really popular, and I read quite a bit of it.
And the original adaptation was a mini series, right? Or was it a movie?
I think so. Yeah, it's weird because I never saw it. I always plan on watching it
Oh,
because
really?
everybody always
That kind of
says,
surprises me.
"Yeah, me too." But everyone always said to watch it, and I actually planned on watching it like last Halloween time period. But I remember them. Obviously, the news was around about that they were making this movie, and I was like, you know what? I'd kind of like to not know much about it. And then I shot that idea in the foot and started reading the book. So, um, so it's like a big deal, and this was like it kind of felt like a long movie too, and that came out this weekend. And originally, I was trying to get you to go see it, and you were thinking about it, and then you ended up not. And I went and saw it with my brother and his wife. So
And let's maybe talk about that whole process. So
yeah, you hate horror movies.
I hate maybe is the wrong word. I am a scaredy cat, and I know better than to go see horror movies. That's maybe a more appropriate way to put it. It's not that I hate them, it's that I can't handle them. Does that make sense?
It does. Like I am aware that these people exist, but it is weird to me because like I get it, like I know that that's a thing, but I can't put myself in that headspace
Yeah.
personally because like none of this stuff bothers me. For instance, I was talking to a friend about this who also saw the movie this weekend, and all people are different. Like I actually don't watch a ton of horror movies, but I've seen plenty and they don't really bother me at all. Like I don't know what it is. Like they just don't like none of it scares me. Like jump scares, sure. Like if something actually gets you that you weren't expecting, but that's different. And jump scares aren't anything that lingers with you.
Right.
Whereas when I'm talking about fear, I'm more talking about like the type of stuff where like people go home at night and they're afraid to be by themselves because they just recently watched like a scary movie
Yeah.
or something.
And so I think you can split it into two pieces. There's the jump scares, right, which I personally just really don't like.
Yeah.
Well, I should say it's not the jump scare itself I don't like. It's sort of the lead up to it, right? Like if something happens in a movie that makes me jump, that can be done to a strong effect that I like enjoy. Like I get the enjoyment of a jump scare, right?
Yeah.
But like when a movie is like silent, and especially scary movies do this where they're just constantly like teasing that something is about to happen, and the music either completely goes off or it's playing some tone that's supposed to lead you
Yeah.
to think something's about to happen. It's like I do not enjoy that tension. Like the tension of a scene where something dramatic is happening, I'll enjoy. But the tension of a scene where it's like there's going to be a loud noise in a couple seconds, or there's not, but I have to
Yeah.
like prepare myself.
See,
It's a feeling I don't
yeah.
like at all.
That's a good distinction because I was going to say, like, one of the things that I like about a scary movie, where, like, if I'll give it props for scaring me, what I typically mean is in the sense that it, like, had me on edge, meaning, like, it was, like, exciting, not like, oh, I'm terrified.
Right.
Like, for instance, my brother's wife that we went with, there was a point, like, halfway through the movie where she just kept looking in his shoulder and she goes, nope, I'm out, I'm done. I can't look. And so every time
I can totally sympathize with that feeling.
yeah, but I get that, but I personally that's the stuff that doesn't really bother me. But I guess for me, like it's just like the tension of like, holy cow, what's happening here? Like you said, like the more dramatic angle. That's the stuff.
Like an
that I
example of something that I would consider high tension that I like is 10 Cloverfield Lane, which came out earlier this year, and I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I think you did too.
Yeah,
And that
I
one,
love it.
it wasn't like the tension was what was happening in the scene and the characters and like what decision is this person going to make, and there was moments where it was incredibly tense, but like it wasn't moments where I thought something loud is going to happen and I'm going to jump, I need to turn away for a second or something, right?
Yeah.
And that feeling to me complete, and maybe it's just because it does affect me so strongly, it completely rips me out of a movie, because now all I can think about is like specific editing cues and like, are they just playing with me here, or are they going to do this stupid loud noise and it's going to make me
Yeah.
jump? And like I stop thinking about what's happening in the movie and just start thinking about the
Yeah.
person making the movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think it had a lot of jump scares, but it had a lot of like just like typical horror imagery, if that makes sense, if I can kind of put that under a very vague umbrella.
Yeah, and that doesn't really bother
Like
me.
lots of scene setups where you know something is going to happen, and the thing that happens isn't a jump scare, it's just sort of like you know this clown thing is going to show up at some point in this scene because that's what we're setting up here.
Right.
Like so you completely anticipate it and expect it. Like I don't know. Jump scares kind of feel cheap to me. I don't completely hate them because like we go to like one of the haunted houses at the Limp Brewery every we've been there a couple years, and that the whole thing is just running off of jump scares.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just people, and that's a lot of fun, but like to
And I
experience.
can completely understand that because I love roller coasters,
Right.
which it's a different part of the brain, but it's a similar thing where it's like
Yeah.
it's trying to get your adrenaline pumping and it's a fun feeling. Like the feeling of falling is a feeling I like.
Yeah, but as a narrative, I don't want that to drive the narrative. Like, there's
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
even some horror movies that I like that have jump scares, but those aren't like central. Like, but then there's those handful that the whole thing, that's all it was.
Right.
And that to me is stupid. So to me, like, I can pretty much handle any horror movies because they just don't bother me. And really is, it just comes down to like, this isn't real. So
Yeah, well, and so that's the sort of other category, right?
yeah,
There's the jump scare thing, which most people at least say they don't like, but I think people just like them because it does kind of trigger that part of your brain that gives you sort of an adrenaline rush, and that's fine. But
yeah,
that's like understandable why somebody wouldn't like that. And then the other aspect is the sort of like it plants an idea in your head that you can't get rid of
yeah,
for a couple nights, right? And that
right.
one I'm also extremely susceptible to.
There may be things that I'm not thinking of that maybe are like that for me, but I really can't think of too many. Like, I get that though, because I will say one of the things that I do like in horror movies, even though they don't sit with me like that, is whenever it can strike a very like creepy or specific tone. So like, I was talking to a friend earlier today, like giving a few examples of that, and whenever I think of movies sort of like that, I think of like The Exorcist or The Shining or even that newer movie The Witch. Those were like they had like these very like eerie, creepy tones. So like while you're in the movie, it's a lot of fun and there's a lot of stress, like that
Right.
fear stress that's to me is exciting. But as soon as the movie ends, it doesn't bother me. There's a lot of times where like my little brother lives here too at my house, but he's gone a lot of the times, and those sorts of things don't bug me. Like I can watch a bunch of horror movies like that by myself with all the lights off before I go to bed and then sleep like a baby. It doesn't bother me where it would other people.
So do you ever get scared of things like that, like being in the dark? Like when you go to bed if a door's open or something.
The only stuff that scares me, like I still think there's still that fear of unknown that everybody has, but
But like are you talking scared in the moment or scared like in a more broad sense, like not knowing what you're going to do with your life or something?
no, no, no. I just mean more in the moment. So like the only types of stuff that really scare me are just sort of like if I'm in bed and you kind of wake up in like that like half sleep and then your dog starts like barking at something, you're like, well, there really shouldn't be anybody here in the middle of the night. Like that always kind of unnerves you a little
Okay.
bit because you're like, I don't feel
It
like,
comforts me to know that you at least experience that. I'm not alone there.
yeah, I right, but it's not like I just watched The Exorcist and now I can't
Right.
go to sleep. Like, I don't feel like I really get that because as soon as the movie's over, I'm like, yes, this isn't real. So it doesn't bother me. Like, it really is just that easy. And maybe it's just because I have enough other stuff to worry about. Like, oh, I got this homework
Yeah.
assignment due tomorrow, you know? And so I have too many other things pulling me away from that. Because there probably was a time whenever I was younger where I was like that. Like, I remember experiencing that in the past, but more nowadays, it's sort of like, none of those movies really bother me in that way. So I like it more when they can just kind of hit a good tone like in the moment. And it doesn't even have to be scary. Like we've talked about like World War Z. Um that was an all right like zombie
Yeah, that
movie.
was like an action
But it
movie
wasn't
though.
yeah, it was like an action movie, but they played tension very well.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't scary. It was just sort of like him, like for instance, him creeping around in the medical facility. You're like on edge the whole time, but it's not because you're scared in a traditional sense. It's just because it's like, oh, holy crap, sneak past that,
Right,
or
right.
stuff
I'll
like
say
that.
this: the stuff that usually gets me the most is when it feels plausible. Does that so like a murder
like a robbery.
kind of
Oh
thing
yeah,
where it's like,
my dad's that way too.
yeah, it's not as big deal if it's a big monster. I'm not scared of like Godzilla.
Like when it's about serial killers or kidnapping children and
Yes,
stuff like
anything with
that.
children too. It's like, yeah, this was even before I had kids, but probably even more after. It's like, nope, I just don't even. I don't like forcing my brain to chew on that because that's the thing. A
Well,
good movie causes me to have a hard time falling asleep because I like chew on the ideas of the movie a lot,
oh yeah.
and I feel like a horror movie, especially a good horror movie, does the same thing, but those ideas can be something that like freaks me out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I have
I
a ranch with a walk-in basement, and like if I
yeah.
see a movie that has like a break-in or something in it, and you're sort of just chewing those thoughts in your head overnight, and you're sitting there like, I mean, it would be really easy to break into my house. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that crazy of an idea. And you're like, well, okay, but my dog's down there and he'd be loud. But then what if they did this? And then you start, at first, it's just your brain thinking through everything. And then then you hear like, the house shift or something and there's a creak. And
Right.
then you just keep playing that idea in your head to the point where you can't let it go. Or at least I do.
Yeah. I will say that some of those more like realistic scares, they have actually made me see or agree with like when in horror movies, there's the whole trope where like something scary is happening and the person is going towards it. And it's like the traditional like, oh, nobody would do that. Like I would get out of the house
Oh
or I
no,
would
that's
do
like
this.
exactly what happens.
Yeah, that's the thing is like if I hear like something thump on the roof,
You have to go look.
I immediately feel like yeah, I'll at least like if I'm really tired and I'm lazy and scared enough, like I'll get up and walk around the house just like, all right, there's nothing going on. It's something fell on the roof, like a pine cone or
Right.
something. Like yeah, but if I felt necessary enough, I would even go outside and walk out in the yard and check the roof and make sure we're good.
Right. Like there's
Like
almost
it's some
nothing more freaky in life than when your dog starts barking in the middle of the night. And
yes.
like, what do? You immediately go to your dog, right? But in a movie, when
Right.
that happens, you go, no, don't go to the dog, like barricade in your house. But the thought you're having
Yeah.
whenever that happens is like, I'm being so silly for caring about
Yeah.
this. I'm just going to go so I can reassure myself that nothing's there.
It really is because part of what makes us afraid is like that unknown quality. And so what you're doing is you're seeking out to eliminate that unknown. As once it becomes a known, it's no longer scary.
Right.
So like even if you figure out, oh, someone's breaking in my house, like it's like a weird thing. Like say someone was breaking in my house right now. Like it would scare me more initially to not know what's going on when I start hearing noise, but the moment I identify, oh, people are breaking in my house, there's still some fear there, but it's like, okay, I know what's going on now and I can either react to this in the proper way or
Right.
not.
Yeah. The unknown is definitely the scariest because what unknown means to you is the worst thing that your brain can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And so I totally get that like I need to search this out. And it's just like people that are in on what's actually going on, whether it be a ghost in the movie or
Right.
whatever, they know more information than the person doing this. So,
So
and even if they did, like, I would still feel like you'd seek it out to try and confront it.
so like on the more less realistic side though, it's not like I think there's a, supernatural monster lurking in my toilet or something, right?
Right.
But like where those get me is when I'm like if I'm taking the trash out, right? And the trash cans at my house are on the side of the house,
Yeah.
which is the same as it was growing up. And it's the side of the house, that's usually dark or whatever. And you're just going over and putting the trash cans back to the side of the house or whatever you're doing. And like I at least frequently will have that thought of like it's dark enough right in that corner and my eyes haven't adjusted. There could be something there.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of an intellectual thought at first. And then you think, what's the scariest thing that could be there in your head, kind of as a funny, like,
Right.
Thought. And what I do weirdly is like, I think of how I would frame that if I were, shooting that in a movie or something.
Yeah.
And then it starts like grabbing a hold of your brain and totally taking over to the point where you do that
Yeah.
awkward, like, try to move as fast as you can, but don't look like you're actually scared of something thing. Does that never happens to you?
I mean, it does sometimes. Like if you're in the middle of the night and you're just kind of walking around, I think it's more like your brain state. So like if you're in the middle of the night and you aren't completely awake, like there's some stuff where I've realized like something bugged me because I heard a noise, and so like I had to turn on the TV and watch TV for an hour and then fall back to
Okay.
sleep
Yeah,
type
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing.
That's the same feeling I'm talking about. I dread that feeling so much.
Yeah, I was more talking about movies causing that feeling. No movie has ever really caused that feeling for me.
Gotcha.
I get those feelings. I'm a normal operating human being.
That's debatable.
I'm just saying, like, movies don't ever cause me to think, oh, what if this is going on? Now, I'm sure they could inform, because there's been times I remember in the past where I used to be more affected by, like, horror movies, where I remember you, like, wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, what if, like, this thing that I saw, like, just appears in front of me right now? Like, how would I react? And that, like, keeps you up for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, like, I started to realize over time, it's just sort of like you're playing that distorted carnival music in your head whenever you're doing that. And you're like, this is all informed by movies. And then I kind of just got to a point where I've seen enough of those, and it's just like, this doesn't bother me anymore.
See, I'm still traumatized by my grandpa accidentally showing me and all my cousins like
Child's Play?
5 minutes of Chucky.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. So
same thing happened to me. That's why I didn't even know you were going to say that.
Oh, did you say Chuck? I didn't hear you say that.
I said Child's Play. That's the name of the first
No.
one.
Yeah.
We used to have like a babysitter when we were little, and I don't think the wife that was actually the babysitter was paying attention, and she was actually really good, so I don't want to disparage her, but I think her husband, looking back now, may have had some like I don't know if it's Alzheimer's or something like that, but I remember there was one time he's just watching TV in the other room, and he's like, "Hey, you guys watch TV?" And we watched like 2 Chucky movies.
Oh, the whole movie!
Like
Holy cow!
Yeah, me and my brother, and we were like, now these were like TBS, like on TV
Sure,
things,
yeah,
so
this
they were edited.
probably was too.
But I remember still being like I remember being young and impressionable enough to think, "Oh, this is a kids movie because there's a toy."
That's why we were watching it.
Yeah, exactly.
And my grandpa couldn't hear, so it lasted until, he started getting freaky faced and there was like lightning outside. It's the only 15 minutes of that movie I've seen to date. But like, if I'm at their house at night, I'm not kidding you, this is still true today, and I go to their bathroom, their shower has, how a lot of them have the window like up at the top.
Yeah.
After I saw that 15 minutes as a kid and I went to the bathroom, I did that little weird like play in your head thing where I was like, how creepy would it be if that doll's face just kind of creeped up from the bottom? To this day, I see that every time I'm in that bathroom.
That's funny.
It freaks me out.
It's just, this has gotten me now on a weird like neural path that I've completely forgotten about, but like I'm just thinking of my grandma as well. we used to go over to her house like every Friday night. We would go over to her house and spend the night. It started because like at the time my mom worked Friday nights late and she would come pick us up late, and then it turned into like we would just spend the night there every
Yeah.
Friday. It just kind of became a tradition when we were younger. And so every Friday we would go rent movies. And it was hilarious cuz like the old movie like stuff like Blockbuster became a bit more prominent and everything, and they were better at this, but we would always go to a family video, and they used to be terrible in their arrangement. So you would like have to walk through the horror
Oh yeah,
section
yeah.
and even some like porn adult section to like get back to certain areas like where cartoons were and stuff. But there was a couple times where like now my grandma is an intelligent woman, but she also because like media because she's older, like even then was sort of above her sometimes. So a lot of times we would rent movies that she thought were kids movies and were not. So I remember one time she like we were like she was like, "Oh, Red Baron, like that might be all right. Like you guys want to watch the Red Baron?" And at the time, I remember we eventually turned it off because it had like lots of like cussing in it and language, and like it was about like this like animated Red Baron toy that came to life and was like
Oh
killing
man.
everybody one by one. But
Maybe this is why you're not scared.
yeah, but no, like she didn't know any better because she was like in the other room cooking, and she just like, oh, this is because I think it was like even out of section because like Family Video filed it,
Right,
but that
right.
happened more than once, like that sort of thing.
Makes me wonder.
And so like I have so many memories of stuff where like because we also like Goosebumps, and my grandma couldn't tell the difference sometimes between like what was kid appropriate or not. And so like there was a handful of movies in there that we watched that we
I wonder
probably shouldn't have.
how many children's lives or how many adult now's lives have been traumatized by their grandparents accidentally watching a horror movie that had a toy in it.
Right.
Or how many kids' lives now are messed up because their grandparents wanted to watch like Ted.
Or Sausage Party. Wasn't that what that was called?
Yeah, that's the like animated
Seth
thing that
Rogen?
Seth
Yeah,
Rogen
yeah.
did.
Yeah. Yeah, there were some early stories about people taking them in.
I bet.
Yeah.
That now was that I never got a clear picture of what that was. Was that a
Oh, it
like
was a filthy rated
so it was
R
rated R.
animated
Okay.
comedy. Yeah.
I didn't know if it was like a like actual kids movie that was just clearly intentionally being double entendre. Is that the right word?
No, yeah, you should get it. You should watch it if you get a chance. It's on Netflix. It's worth a
Is
look.
it?
It really is. It's funny. It's deceptively clever. Because like they tend to make a lot of movies like that, by the way. Like I know you don't watch a lot of them because they're firmly in the category of like raunch comedies, but
Right.
there's a handful that him and Franco have made, or some of those combinations of people where it's like this they are playing off like they're just a bunch of dumb morons, but this is like deceptively intelligent.
Isn't that like Franco's life? He plays off as a
Yeah.
dumb guy, but he's deceptively
Yeah.
intelligent. Or at least
Right,
he's led
exactly.
enough people to believe that he's intelligent. And he doesn't ever have
Right.
to prove it because he's playing a character that is dumb.
Yeah. Well, back to horror movies though. So to kind of bring this full circle so we can actually talk about the movie. Yeah, so I say all of this derivative or rabbit trail conversation to say like part of what entertains me about scary movies is not necessarily the scare factor because it doesn't affect me like it does other
Right.
people, but I like it for if they can come up with an interesting angle. So even if it's an action movie or a thriller or just has a good story, that's what I like.
And I
So,
would say I fall in the exact same category. And that's why, as like when we were growing up, I pretty much would grill you and a couple other friends that I knew for the whole stories of most of these popular horror movies because I actually find
Yeah.
a lot of their stories interesting. And I've actually made myself watch a couple of them in broad daylight, but those are more the ones that are like, cinematically important. Like I've watched like The Shining.
Sixth Sense.
I've
Sense.
watched The Sixth Sense. I watched Blair Witch Project just because of
Oh,
the
yeah,
kind
that's
of,
right. That one's great.
yeah. I mean, it was interesting, but like I actually do find the stories interesting.
Yeah.
and this one in particular, it I like the sort of 80s coming of age, Spielbergian kind of
Right.
stories. So that actually did intrigue me. And
Yeah. So I guess let's go ahead and stop here before I say anything and say that just give a spoiler warning that if you don't want any version of it, whether it's the old movie, the new one, or the book, spoiled for you, just kind of skip ahead a few minutes to the end, or just kind of skip this
actually,
section because,
we'll make this the last section. So feel free
yeah,
to
that works.
just skip right on through, or pause it if you're planning on watch it, and then you can come back.
Because I'm basically gonna. Charlie hasn't seen it or any of them, but he's kind of okay given the type of movie that it is for me
Yep.
spoiling it. But I will be talking about plot details for anybody else who hasn't seen it. So, all right, with that out of the way, so yeah, what's interesting about the movie is, so it's based off the book, and the book is a kind of a different timeline, but it is still like the coming of age sort of thing, but it's except in the book, which was written in the '80s, modern day was the '80s. And the back in time storyline was set in the '50s,
Okay.
and it wasn't split in two necessarily. It was back and forth.
In the
The
book.
main Yeah.
Okay.
Now, in the book, about 2/3 of the book is kind of dedicated to the kid's story, and then the purpose of it being structured like that, going back and forth, is because kind of the whole thing is it's like this thing happens every 27 years. This is 27 years later. As adults, they made this promise that if these killings started happening again, they would come back and get this done with once and for all, to like, because no one
And
else.
they figured out the 27 years thing before?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's interesting because they updated it. And so now the back in time storyline is the '80s, which is more culturally relevant anyway, because we have a fascination nowadays with the
Yeah, yeah.
'80s because we've
Which
moved
they
up in
probably
time.
did with the 50s then.
The '50s, exactly. And so what's interesting about it, I don't know if you know this, it came out 27 years
Oh,
later.
well played. Nice. Nicely done.
Yeah. And so it's kind of cool from the time setting in the movie. And but this is different because this movie did not go back and forth like the book did. So the fact that they just announced a sequel opening weekend, and that the end credits of this movie said "It Chapter 1,"
Yeah.
um it means that they have planned this to split them in two, which will be interesting.
Yeah.
What they'll lose is the thrust of like the '80s nostalgia for the second film, but there's enough there because kind of one of the things that's interesting about the story of this movie is there's this like meta narrative about like how like small towns and things that we grow up with can harbor this darkness and things that people don't want to talk about or deal with or face. And so that's kind of the driving narrative of this story. And with the adult storyline, I'm assuming that they'll do in the future, will be also playing on that with like, we never dealt with this problem, we need to go back, and you
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
get where they could go with that. And so that is what made the story interesting, because it's a horror movie that actually has a really like incredible point behind it, which is something that apparently like Stephen King, like small towns are like a big thing that's always on Stephen King's mind
It seems
in his
like it
book writing.
based on most of his books.
Yeah. And this is sort of his like magnum opus, if you will, of like that sort of thing. And it was also one of his earlier writings about that sort of topic. And so it's a very dark movie, but it's interesting because it has like a lot of I guess the only good way to say it is a lot of heart to it, because you're following around a group of kids out of high school. So it was a very like Goonies, Super
Stand
8,
by
Stranger
me.
Things, Stand by
Yeah, yeah.
Me. Yeah, it's clearly like in that sort of genre, but it's pretty dark. So
Well, I mean, it still has a evil clown that like turns into a spider or something, right?
doesn't turn into a
Oh,
spider, but
okay.
his jaws like rip open and he eats
Yeah,
children. So
gotcha.
it's and I will say this, like there's some people, like I saw a couple people, friends of mine, that were saying like, oh, it wasn't that scary, and like it could have been a PG-13 movie. I disagree, because there's quite a bit of blood in this movie, whether it was like like horror type imagery where like blood is like shooting out of a sink faucet because someone is like seeing things, or all kinds of various
Right.
setups. Like there is some pretty violent stuff in the movie. So the opening of the movie, which is like the famous scene from the original and the book, is kid playing outside in a rainstorm and his boat goes down into a sewer. And so he goes up to the sewer and there's a clown down there talking to him, and the clown bites his arm off
Nice.
and pulls him into the sewer. And you see that in the movie. I was wondering how graphic they would get with like a 5-year-old
And
kid, but
they just went right into it.
yeah. So there's some graphic stuff in the movie, but it's not like your traditional like rip people apart type stuff at all. Aside from a couple like sort of like shock value scenes like that,
Right.
it's not actually over the top, because the majority of the movie it's very like Super 8, Stranger Things, that sort of thing.
Which I love that stuff.
Yeah, just a lot of kids making inappropriate jokes, and with the R rating, they're allowed to go a little bit further than they might have in some stuff, which honestly, that's what Stand By Me was. Stand By Me was an R rating, I believe. And they don't go over the top, like they don't cross any lines or anything, but it is, I mean, it is, there are parts of it that are very funny and played for comedic effect. So it was kind of an interesting tone, because it kind of had a lot of things that I liked. It had like the 80s nostalgia stuff with those sorts of movies. It had an interesting like meta narrative to it all, and it was just overall a great movie. I was not scared one bit, but
I would
my
be.
my brother's wife was. Yeah. And the clowns, the only thing that I thought was sort of unbelievable was like, this clown is horrifying by any standards. And so I don't understand how any kid would talk to a clown for like a minute
Ever.
with him. Yeah, because the clown like lures him to the drain, and it's like a constant like thing where he'll like lure them to him,
Right.
or something like that. And so, and I don't know if you know this, but the whole like deal with the clown is it's not like an actual clown. It's some sort of like creature that lives in the sewers that can like shapeshift.
Yeah. I do know that for some reason.
Yeah, it has to feed on people's fears. So if they're not afraid of it, then then it can't really do anything to them. So it feeds on people's fears, which kind of plays into the point, like facing your fears,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah, and so and so it'll like shapeshift to different things to attract. So there's a couple different things it actually turns into in the movie, but for the most part, it stays in that clown form.
It seems like a weird choice. I'd go Ice Cream Man, maybe.
Yeah, could be, because I think the 80s people were kind of getting sick and tired of clowns. So
Maybe. Well, that may have been when it started.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because it could have been because of that book.
I'm sure it did not do a whole lot of good for the clowning community.
Yeah, they're probably kind of tired of it.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
But yeah, so overall, that's sort of my snapshot review of the movie. I really liked it. So if you're going to look to be like scared out of your pants, I don't think that'll happen. But it's just a really good, solid movie despite that.
So going like ignoring the sort of horror aspect of this, was it like well filmed? I mean, did it feel? Was it like Stranger Things with good soundtrack, good acting, good cinematography?
Yeah, it was very well filmed. Lots of like okay, there was a couple things that I thought were kind of jarring as far as like cinematography, if you will, but for the most part, yeah, it was pretty solid. Like even some of the stuff that was played for like comedic effect was like if the movie would have been bad around it, it would have been another thing to complain about. But it was sort of like, because it was funny and the rest of the movie was working so well, it was kind of like, yeah, that was a good part of it.
No, I totally understand that. Like, there's things Transformers can't get away with because everything around it's kind of lame, and you're not in a tense situation where like you could get away with it in The Dark Knight, or like Planet of the Apes. The Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the one we just saw. There was a couple parts of that where there was sort of a comedic effect that both of us were like, it almost feels like that should have been jarring and wrong, but because the movie was so good and tense around it,
yeah, exactly,
it's like it was appropriate in that place and it felt good.
Well, to give an example from the movie, so like there's like this small little joke between two of the characters. There's like let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kid characters in the group.
Yeah, I heard there was a little bit of too many characters in this.
Oh, I liked it. I thought it was
Oh, okay.
fine. But yeah, I could see that, but it's sort of a nitpick thing. Yeah, so there's one character that the female lead interacts with early on and finds out that like he's from a different state, and she's like, "Hey, let me listen to your Walkman or whatever." And so he lets her listen to the headphones, and it's like New Kids on the Block, and she sort of like pokes fun at him because it's like New Kids on the Block, and I guess that was like, I don't know, maybe there's a
Lame.
stigma
Yeah,
around
I
that.
don't know.
Yeah. And but she like jokes around with him about it, not like being mean. And so like later on in the movie, he tells him like, "Hey, I got all this stuff in my house that I've been like looking into this in the library. You guys can all come up." So like he runs into his room and like quickly puts a couple of things away. And so they're like looking at all this stuff in his room, and his like door to his room like starts to shut a little bit, and there's this huge New Kids on the Block poster on it, and she looks at it and makes eye contact with him, and all of a sudden just like blaringly loud New Kids on the Block starts like playing for like 3 seconds, and then it cuts back to the normal scene.
Oh, like it's
And
not
so
within the movie; it just played.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
weird.
And so it was like this like sort of jarring thing, but it was also a joke that played
Did
well,
it play
if that
well
makes
in your
sense.
theater? Were people laughing?
Yeah, everybody thought it was
Okay,
funny.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I mean by like there was a couple moments. They even did they did a part where like there's a scene that's like there's a pretty horrific scene where like girl sees something down the drain, all this blood shoots all over her thing, completely covers the entire bathroom with blood. Her dad can't see it, so she brings her friends up there and says like, "Can you guys see this?" And they're like, "Yeah, we can see it." And they're like, "Well, we can't leave this like this." And they like intentionally start playing like a super 80s song and a cleanup montage, like
like Breaking
on
Bad.
purpose. Yeah, and they knew what they were doing. Like, because like Family Guy has made fun of that before. They're like, "Hey, I know how we'll fix this up. Let's do a cleaning montage."
Right,
and they'll
right.
just play like Huey Lewis in the News and like a montage of people like playing and
Ferris
cleaning
Bueller
up.
shows up.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's exactly what they did. And it was something that didn't necessarily fit with the movie in a like narrative sense, but like it was kind of in line with the period joke.
Yeah, well, and I feel like
that sort of
sometimes
thing.
for tension to be effective, sometimes you need to cut it and then let
Yeah.
it build back up.
No, I really do think though, I think it's a movie you would enjoy because about 90% of it is not the clown on screen.
So,
And it's not particularly horrifying to me, but I think you would like it because of that period piece genre, personally.
yeah, so like maybe like what's your sort of overall review then?
So my overall review is like I said, if you're looking to be terrified, I don't think it'll quite do that, but it's a great movie on top of that. Like I would definitely give it 4 out of 5 stars. I'd give it an 85% if you want a percent. It's a movie that I will probably buy and watch when I'm like in the Stranger Things mood, but I've seen Stranger Things too many times.
That actually
so.
makes me okay. Last question. How was the music?
The music was good. The soundtrack was like a weird mix of like unique horror music, and then also some like it had some like modern tones to it too. Some like thumps and bass.
But nothing that really like super jumped out at you.
Well, obviously there's the 80s soundtrack that goes with it.
Meaning like actual music from the 80s.
Yeah, right. And but as far as like the actual instrumental stuff, it was very good. Like apparently it's like a big download right now on iTunes. Like it was trending.
Okay, good.
So it's good music.
That's one of my favorite things about that style of movie is the soundtracks that seem to come out of it. Like Stranger Things soundtrack is just amazing, I think. And then like I really like Drive, which isn't set in the 80s but has that vibe to it.
Yeah, and like what was it? Like 9 Inch Nails has done a couple horror movie soundtracks, I feel like. No, they did Social Network.
Well, so that wasn't 9 Inch Nails, that was crap, what was his name? Trent Reznor. Yeah, Trent Reznor did. He did The Social Network and a couple other David Fincher movies. I like him.
Gotcha.
I like that a lot. I don't know that I've ever
Yeah.
actually really listened to Nine Inch Nails, but the Social Network soundtrack, especially, I really, really
It's
like.
like he does very industrial rock sounding
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
It's
and
very unique.
the for the soundtracks, it's a lot more like ambient, but yeah, it's that same sort
Yeah,
of
yeah.
feel.
Nine Inch Nails actually has a double album that you might be interested in called Ghosts, and it's all instrumental
Oh,
stuff.
okay, similar kind of feel. Is it
It's not heavy. It's very soundtracky feeling.
interesting?
And it's some of it's very ambient and boring, but a lot of it's like very intricate and interesting. It's his like electronic
Well,
stuff.
but that's
Yeah.
the kind of stuff I like. That stuff for while I code.
Oh, you would probably like that then. I would definitely write down Nine Inch Nails
All right,
Ghosts.
I
It's
will
like super long and
put it into my
no
Spotify.
vocals.
All right, got it. Thank you. We were thinking about doing like a live episode of us going and seeing it, and then me talking about how scared I was. But I don't know if I had actually told you this before, but I had ordered that movie pass,
Oh yeah.
and I was going to kind of do a little review thing of it. And I was like, oh, I'll just like order it, and then we can talk about it on the podcast later. But apparently, that's been back ordered. Like there were so many people
Yeah.
that ordered them that they couldn't make the little credit cards fast enough. So
Yeah, Nick still hasn't gotten his yet either.
yeah, so that was the straw sort of like, well, okay, if I have to pay for it, I'm not going to do this. But how about
Yeah.
this? If we're still doing this podcast whenever the next one comes out, when is that supposed to be? Is it like in a couple years or something?
I think it's next year.
Well, that maybe is more likely. All right, well, okay, I'll do it anyway. Let's do that. We can watch
The
the
first
first
one.
one and then go and see the second one, which will probably be
Okay.
the first horror movie I've ever seen in theaters.
That's all right. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely remember that. So
Hopefully you won't.
so so deal.
All right. We'll see if we last that long.